Welcome everybody to another episode of the Art Business Podcast. My name's David Bellingham. I'm Programme Director of the Master's Degree in Art Business at Sotheby's Institute of Art in London. And as you know from my previous episodes, I'm lucky to have a lot of very interesting guests, but from, different parts of the art world. And this week is possibly one of the most unusual people working in the art world that I'm about to have the pleasure to interview. Welcome, Adam Blackwood. And Adam is founder and creative director of Private Drama Events. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you, and nice to meet with you again, David. After that initial chat, it's great to be here, and I'm really looking forward to having a chat with you about our conversation about the arts and the world that we work in, and how that engages our audience.
Absolutely.
So yes, very much looking forward to it.
Fantastic. And that title is only the tip of the iceberg for as far as Adam's experience is concerned. So we'll get to that in a minute. But as usual, I'm going to start with my normal desert island disc question. So Adam, could you just tell us, do you have a favorite city? And if so, why that might be?
I think, I was thinking about this, and it has to be London, even though I'd love to say it was Florence or Rome, where I love to go to. But the thing about I'm just passionate about London is that there is just so much on offer to us literally every day. And walking or theatre is something that I'm very much part of my life. And I always love walking through the city and thinking, as we approach 7:30, it feels a bit like that teeing up where all over London at 7:30, and for the sake of argument, call it 7:30, where there are fringe openings, opera houses, dance studios opening up for a performance that night. And what a joy to have all that back post-COVID. It's all thriving again and meeting those challenges. But all over London, that activity is popping up. And I often when I'm walking through the streets, I just love that sense of all those things happening. Not least all those restaurants, but that sense of people, that appetite and that hunger for people to go to the theatre or to go to a fringe venue or to go to a comedy club, whatever it is. But it's all there, and there's just such an incredible offering. So that's part of what informs it. And I think also, as we look around, I love walking across the Thames from Embankment as you're walking towards the Festival Hall, where the National Theatre is. We're often going on the Festival Hall, and you look down the river, that incredible view towards the city, and how that changes each year. We see all these buildings popping up, that change the view, and also that wonderful sense that you get in the summer of everyone being outdoors on the embankment, doing, they're about to go in to see something. There's just a fantastic atmosphere. So I love that, and then you find all its quiet moments as well, be it in the parks. I live in West London, and just going to say Chiswick House, beautiful gardens there, just wandering around, having the peace. So London offers so much, and I suppose that's my desert island city.
That's brilliant. And I'm close to you on all of that. I think the river, I went up to see the John Singer Sargent exhibition at Tate Britain the other day. And it's just fantastic. Because I probably live quite near you, but maybe on the south of the river, I'm at Kew Gardens. So
oh, right, yes,
one stop into Richmond and then train to Vauxhall, and you walk across Vauxhall Bridge. And again, every bridge has a different view. And then there's a lovely little coffee place, Italian coffee place on the other side of the river that becomes a ritual. And then you have a coffee there and you're ready to go to the exhibition. And it's, as you say, it's just filled with all sorts of people from all sorts of places. Every exhibition you go to has a mixture of people. There's a diversity, as I think you were hinting at as well, which is fantastic. And sorry, I'm talking too much about myself there.
No.
Can I ask you, can you remember which was the last theatrical or performing arts event you went to in London?
It was Guys and Dolls at the Bridge.
I've seen that. When was that? The other day?
No, it was about a month ago.
Oh,
It's again, I'm very involved, and we'll come on to this later about this rather overused word of immersive theatre, or
yeah,
that, and defines so many things like Punch Drunk and Uni
yes,
Bum Train and all these different companies that
yeah,
the Secret Cinema,
yeah.
the immersive world. But what I thought Nick Heitner, the director of Guys and Dolls, had done such a brilliant job of making this production faultlessly immersive. And I don't know where you sat, David, or did you sit or sat? I
No,
stood.
unfortunately, I wasn't in the arena, as it were. I was watching.
Well, when my wife said she booked tickets for it, having done a lot of work at the Globe Theatre, where I have stood a lot, and I had said, look, I never want to stand again, and just said, believe me, because she's seen Julius Caesar there, said you really must stand. So I did, and I just loved it. I think that freedom to move around, but I mean, it's just such a fantastic production of Guys and Dolls. It's just full of all the design is beautiful, but it's one of the great musicals of all time. I mean, I saw when I just left drama school, Nick Height, not Nick Heitner, God, his name's going to come to me in a minute, but the
No worries.
director of the National, Richard Eyre, had directed Guys and Dolls with Bob Hoskins and Ian Charleston, Julie Mackenzie. Was a fantastic production, and I remember then, gosh, that's a long time ago. It was a sort of defining production, but it is one of the great musicals of all time.
Yeah, I entirely agree. And anyone listening, I don't know if it's still running, but the theatre itself is in an amazing location in London near, it's called The Bridge and it's near Tower Bridge.
Yeah,
There's this
absolutely.
beautiful kind of eco gardens just round the corner from it, I remember. And also for my students, it's very, very close to um, Bermondsey and the White Cube Gallery, the warehouse, big warehouse space down there, which I
Yeah,
remember actually the day I went to Guys and Dolls, I went with my wife and we first went to see an amazing Anton Kiefer show, the great German living painter at White Cube, and then we came up to the theatre and we went to a matinee. It was amazing. I loved it. And then
yeah.
there's that fantastic walk back if you want to along the South Bank to Waterloo Station. So yeah, I think we're singing from the same hymn book there, Adam.
Yeah.
What about are there any kind of opposite places like country places or see, where you get away from it all? Do you have those
Yeah,
kind of locations?
there's a beautiful part of the world that I go to every year down in Cornwall called Prussia Cove. And Prussia Cove is just near Penzance, and it's like something out of a Daphne du Maurier novel. So it's this collection of properties, but in particular, this is called Porthonall's House, which is it's granite building, a sort of arts designed in arts and crafts style. So it's a real novelty being there, and you're facing right onto the sea. And they also hold a music festival every year, twice a year, where students who are basically leaving the Royal Academy, Royal College of Music, come and attend master classes, and all the students stay in all the properties. So there's a
Wow.
huge amount of music making, huge amount of painting that happens. We're just around the corner from galleries down in Newlyn, and of course
Yes.
the whole Newlyn School of Art that's down there. Fantastic galleries for outdoor exhibitions. It's a wonderful place of peace where you can kind of close the door on daily life and get away and escape, and particularly be by the sea. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. We sometimes, well, this year we did take our students down to St. Ives, where we work with some of the galleries down there for some immersive experiences. The students curate, they select and curate some of the works and can even sell them if
Yeah,
anyone comes in from the public. So that's a little bit of a hands-on experience for them. And obviously we do Tate, and if we have time, we walk along the coast path and enjoy that.
yeah.
And of course, not least, visit the artist studios there. So
There's a one. Oh,
yeah, go on. No, please.
I was going to say there's a wonderful book, if you haven't read it, called The Salt Cellar, which is a wonderful, not it's a true story. A husband and wife who basically sadly lose all their money, and basically they've got to pack up their home, and they decide that they're going to walk the coastal path,
All right.
which goes right through St Ives and right through where I'm staying.
Yeah.
And it's a life-affirming book about how two people look at their relationship and how they look after it, and the things that happen to them along the way. And they wild camp, and all these things that happen to them, how they manage to survive on money. And it has a wonderful turn. She now talks. She does TED Talks. And her husband recovered, who was very ill. So it's extraordinary. But if you ever get a chance, do read it.
I know people who've read it, and I think there was a follow-up, if I remember rightly.
Yeah,
as there would be. So Adam, any buildings in the world that particularly move you or interest you?
Yes, I have a favourite place in London that I have very strong associations with. It's a place called Two Temple Place, and I don't know if you.
I'm going to say it again, but we actually had our student reception there for our new students. Yeah, we've done that a couple of times actually, but I speak about it.
Well, it has, for me, it resonates for me. Because a lot of people don't know about it. You could easily walk past it, which is you come out of Temple Tube Station, heading up towards the courts, but instead of going up, you just turn right. And there is this sort of Tudor, faux Tudor building that William Waldorf Astor built. And inside, he was passionate about writing and about the novels of his time. So you can see depicted in the mahogany newel posts, which are the characters from the Four Musketeers. And then there are things like Ivanhoe and Pocahontas, Robin Hood, are all depicted in these large things. And I suppose for me as an actor, there's also a frieze in mahogany, which depicts 82 characters from the plays of Shakespeare, from Henry VIII and Othello, Macbeth and Antony and Cleopatra. And it's rather wonderful. You can go pick out the characters. But most particularly, I have actually created there a lot of events, a lot of parties, a lot of dinners, and done everything there from opera in there, musical cabarets. I've had Sir Martin in the Field, a small version of Sir Martin in the Field Orchestra performing downstairs. And it's a great place to have a party. I've even done weddings there.
That's amazing.
That's my favorite place.
No, I get that. I guess we've already got some ideas about some of your musical and theatre tastes, and I'm sure we're going to hear more about those later. So I won't ask you what a favorite. In fact, I don't tend to ask people what favorite play is. Maybe I should, or film, But what I do ask people is music. Do you have well, obviously you have an interest in music, but is there a particular music, maybe that would be on your playlist at the moment, top of your playlist?
So I go sort of cyclically through all sorts of different bits of music that I love. There probably is very little that I don't like. So my whole taste goes across from classical music, rock and roll to musicals. I'm a big musical fan, and we're very connected with that, and a huge fan of the opera. Again, I find one of the completely enchanting experience for me is where everything comes together, because you've got acting, singing, an orchestra, and all the design of it. It is wonderful. So I often listen to La Bohème, or is my favorite opera, and that's often off my playlist.
My son saw his first Puccini the other day. We went to the Royal Opera House to see Tosca in what we thought was an amazing production. So he was, wow, I didn't realize that's where that melody came from. These tunes are kind of in the air, aren't they?
Yeah.
I totally get that. And I guess Wagner conjured up that amazing German compound word Gesamtkunstwerk, didn't he? Where it's total artistic experience. He was hoping for his operas.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that's great that London can offer, and when it's a complete surprise. I had someone I'm working with at the moment who is also working at the Royal Opera House and said, "Oh, look, if I call you, you just have to say yes." And she was in La Bohème, at the Royal Opera House, and they offer last-minute tickets to you. The best seat in the house, I think it was £10. So we sat. Four of us went and sat in the stalls and watched it. I was just blown away on a Sunday. I went 6 o'clock in the afternoon and sat. I thought this is heaven. It was really great.
Absolutely. And and then arts coming on now to, the core of the podcast. So obviously again, I appreciate the fact that we all have different moods and different art for different moods. But again, if you could only take one artwork to your desert island, what would that be?
I think it would be Fragonard's The Swing.
Oh wow.
Which I love, and partly because I discovered the Wallace collection, which is one of those galleries that you could miss it. You're going to the National Gallery, and someone told me you must go to the Wallace collection. You'll see the Laughing Cavalier there and Fragonard's The Swing. And I love it because it's very theatrical, and the viewpoint of the artist, of the way he's looking at it, which is quite naughty, and the fact you've got that whole period. I just love, and that sense of joy that's in that painting, and where you find it and where you discover it. And so yeah, that would be that's absolutely would be in my desert island wall that I would be putting up and enjoying.
You're quite right. It's the whole context, isn't it, of the whole Wallace collection, which is, you're surrounded by Sèvres porcelain and the best of the best, really, from that 19th century, particularly French taste that Lord Hertford had, who made the core of that collection. And I'm pretty certain there are listeners to this podcast who would probably choose the same work. It wouldn't surprise me at all. And so you were thinking back. You were educated at RADA, for the listeners in case they don't know London well. It's the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. I always
correct. Yeah, that's it, David. Yeah, you've got it.
And is it, when you went there, is it where it is now, which I believe is up opposite in Gower Street? Is it, or
Gower Street? Yeah, that's where it was.
It's still there. It was there then. Yeah.
So it was.
An amazing number of sort of people have come through that acting school.
I mean, it was an extraordinary time. It was also very, I don't know what it's like for you with your students, but there were only, in any term, there were only 27 students. So it was a very, and unlike any other of the drama schools like Central and LAMDA, they had you would have a year cycle. And at RADA, there was a new intake every alternative term. So a new 27. So you could either be four intakes or three, depending on which month, which quarter you were in for the third part of the year you were in. And there were amazing, extraordinary. So I was there with Kenneth Branagh, John Sessions, who's sadly no longer still alive, amazing people who were coming through, who were just, you could just see their careers taking off. And I'm sure it's very different to what it is now. I mean, the way we were taught was that you still had to, as I say, hit the back of the wall in the National at the Olivier. You had to be heard without any amplification at all. And that training doesn't, I don't think, exist in the same way. So if now you go to the Olivier, that's all amplified. Great that everyone can hear. Of course, it's great. But that whole tradition of the classics, Shakespeare, Chekhov, Restoration comedy, were all the things that you would go through, along with fighting and doing broadsword fighting and rapier and dagger, all those skills that you acquire. And I noticed recently there's a lady called Patsy Rodenberg who was head of speech. She used to be at the RSC and then taught at the Guildhall, and she's just resigned because she felt that no one is being taught that way of working anymore. And I think it's very hard to get people who now can perform in a theatre in the way that we understand theatre, to that craftsmanship of recreating it night after night, as probably you would have seen when you saw Guys and Dolls at the National. Guys and Dolls at the Bridge. That tradition has very much changed because of this language that we have now. There's much more television work for actors. There's a lot of immersive. There's a whole now. I noticed that there are people who now teach immersive theatre. So there's that whole world itself. So some people have never even performed in a major theatre. So when we've done casting sessions for when we're recruiting actors, quite often they have no sense of projecting out, and I don't mean just vocally. I mean how you convey a character and a bit of storytelling. So it's very, very different now. And I'm not saying it's better or worse. It's just very different. And that craftsmanship. I went to see a play at the Octopus at the National by Dodie Smith, which had a big cast, and everything was amplified. I was terribly aware, literally everything is amplified in the theatre now. But
well, and Guys and Dolls, for obvious reasons, I think they had Little Nights, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, I mean, obviously, I'm probably around the same generation as you, and one of the things one used to love that both the theatre and at the opera is I couldn't believe that these opera singers, for example, were filling a huge hall like the New York Met or the Royal Opera House, just with their voice, just singing. And I think it was Domingo once said that he was talking about there's a certain spot on the stage at the Opera House that each singer tries to find, and I think it's slightly different for each singer because of their own timbre. And he said, once you find that place to stand, you try and agree with the director. When I sing this particular aria, I must stand here. And he said that, and I remember sometimes when you're in the opera, you've probably had this experience. It's almost as though the whole building is vibrating with the voice of the singer. And I don't know, you obviously act yourself, but as a lecturer, I often find that there's an acoustic which does the same thing, and it's a tremendous feeling when you suddenly realize you hit this. It's to do with your pitch and your volume. You have to get it just right, and then it kind of vibrates all around you, and everybody seems to be engaged.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, to go back to Two Temple Place has got a fantastic acoustic because it's all wood.
Yeah.
And that, if you were in a building with a lot of stone, it's a completely different acoustic. Only reason I'm referring to that is because I work in those sorts of venues where you're doing performance, and if anything with wood, carpets, all of that's great. If you've got marble, it's a nightmare.
Absolutely, yeah, because you just want to put cushions all around it, and the Royal Albert Hall, of course, I believe it has those what I used to call upside down mushrooms or settees that because otherwise the acoustics are awful in there, as I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the acoustic. They've done a lot of work on it. I think even now they've added more. When I was last there, they've added speakers into the boxes as well, just to get that balance absolutely right. It's very hard to get that balance between what actually sounds acoustic and directional at the same time as trying to get that balance of sound right. I think it's a whole science itself, is sound.
Sure. And then following, I don't know whether you wanted to say any more about if you have any anecdotes about your student life at RADA, but then I know that you become a freelance actor for quite a long period of time, for about 20 years, for 2 decades, and that you were working both in theatre, film, and TV. And as you say, that is what we see actors doing now in particular. So maybe you were going through years of change where, as an actor, you could be called upon for TV, film, and theatre. And I mean, sometimes we find actors who appear first on TV, as I understand it, and suddenly they're on stage, and a lot of people go and see them on stage, and they sell out simply because there's some heartthrob that people have seen on TV or whatever. Maybe you could say a little bit more about your experience through that 20 years as a freelance actor.
So, I mean, my first job was actually in telly. I did something for the BBC. It was based on a Kipling's Life called Stalky and Co. Okay. But the majority of my work was theatre, because in our group, or at the times that we were leaving, there still existed what was called a repertory company, by which a group of actors would be living in the town and would put on a play. It might change every month, every week, or fortnightly. And I did a lot of work in the theatre, particularly working with Alan Ayckbourn up at his theatre up in Scarborough, which was a wonderful place to work, partly because my real heart is comedy. And working with Ayckbourn on comedy was a complete joy, because he's a very, very funny man, and he loves rehearsing, and he loves that moment of discovery that you have when you're working as an actor, where you have this moment where it's a bit like you talking about that sweet spot of sound. You just lean into something and you realize, oh, now I know what I'm doing. I've got it. I've got what I'm. And watching Alan laugh at it, his own writing is great. But as time went on, I had a real mix. I was very lucky. I did a lot of theatre. I did a lot of TV or film for TV. So I worked a lot for Disney, doing the Old Curiosity Shop, the Old Curiosity Shop, the Kidnapped, which I did as well. The Old Curiosity Shop. They were great fun to do and completely different. And working with amazing performers, I worked with Tom Courtenay, Peter Ustinov, who also were great storytellers, and for me were sort of my heroes from films, television, theatre. It was a really joyous time when you were working. When you're not working, it can be quite a lonely place. We often used to think of a lot of actors tell this story as a description of what it feels like of when you're working, you're in the garden and it's all lovely and you're inside the trees. When you're not, you're outside of the wall and you can hear it going on inside. You can hear that someone's having a party in there. You know it's great in there, but you're not there. And that's sort of the divide between when you're working and when you're not working, is that sort of secret garden, that on the inside it's fantastic and all the joys of doing it are there, and when you're outside it's pretty miserable because you never know when the next job's going to come. So that was a sort of very much a mixed world. And when it's I was lucky enough in particularly my later time, I spent a lot of time in Ireland filming for Disney on these different things that I did. Great Expectations as well, and then also comedy. So I did a long-running series with Harry Enfield and Stephen Fry, Jeeves and Wooster. So I was playing a character called Balmy Fungy Phipps, which is a ridiculous name, and had great fun doing that. They were an absolute joy to work with.
No, those were hilarious. I watched all of those, so I remember.
Okay.
And then, for listeners, I think it's a very kind of British kind of comedy, maybe Jeeves and Wooster, but they should give it a try because they might find it very, very funny. And I think we can all do with the catharsis of laughter at the moment.
Yeah. So that was sort of my acting career. Really was the majority of focusing particularly on comedy. A lot of that really dominated what I was doing.
Yeah, and then I mean we might come back to some of those memories, but then moving on to what we're the main subject, I guess, of the podcast is what you're doing at the moment. So as I understand it, in the early millennium, you became the founder director of private drama events, as I introduced you, but also then in 2021 of Wisewood Digital. I just wondered whether you could tell us about that slight change of direction within drama and performing arts into the private drama events, and also how those two businesses, the Wisewood Digital and the private drama events, might relate to one another.
Yeah. So as we all know, COVID came along and changed the landscape of everything that I was doing at that time. So up to that time, we were involved with live events for every type of art with large audience, and that of course had to come to an immediate stop, and basically our business was completely wiped out. We were just shut down and we couldn't do anything. And just going to say very quickly, it's really by that creative process where you sit down and you think, what are we going to do? We either sink or we're going to swim. And so I started thinking about how could we communicate still, but we couldn't do it in person. How could we reach out to each other, tell stories, entertain people, tell ideas. And I started experimenting in the digital world about what you could do and how you could make events happen. And I was lucky enough to get together with two other companies who I brought in and said, look, let's do this together. I think this has got legs, which was basically building in a virtual world a venue within which you could enter into it, explore it, sit in it, and you could watch what we eventually did, which was create content within a virtual space. So by the use of using an app and a computer, you could go into this venue, which loosely looked like Quaglino's. It sort of was a very sort of had a sort of 30s feel where entertainment was definitely going to happen. There was a stage and we had bars there. So, and then we started recording on green screen different content. So by the time we were now using masks, we were allowed to use masks. We were 2 meters apart. We were able to bring people together when we're recording by using green screen technology. If anyone, I'm going to make it clear. So green screen technology is basically allows you to trick the camera by later on putting in any other imagery. So all you see is an artist on a green screen. But then effectively when it's then watched, you can place that person anywhere. So like Star Wars, it's the same, it's using something called Unreal Engine, which is what gaming uses. And it's 360. So you're moving literally in 2D and 3D. You're able to do that. And we basically did what we had been doing in the live world, we did in the virtual world. And that became a way of communicating and telling stories. So we have, it probably now doesn't feature as much as what we're doing, but we still have a small amount of our work where people want to sustain something in the virtual world, do something virtual, not traveling all around the world to do something, as often we do. We could do it in a virtual world. So everyone could, it's like broadcasting. Everyone can log in from all over the world and we would host something within that space and people could communicate through an app. They're actually communicating with each other and effectively responding to what they're seeing. And that was the technology that we were using. To all intents and purposes, we were broadcasting. That's what we were doing, but without any of that level of finance that you know the BBC has. We could never let it fail. So we had a backups to keep everything up all the time, so we didn't ever lose signal. Which, as you know, often be on Zoom or Teams, you can lose. We've got used to that world, and we knew that we would fall if we ever lost signal, which thank God we didn't. So that was really that transition. It was a force of what COVID required us to do, and so it actually was. I wouldn't want to go back to the days of what all of us went through, what COVID meant to all of us, and the challenge. But creatively, it was a really thrilling time to work because you were minting stuff new, and the risks we took and the chances in terms of trying to make something work was worth it because things were just landing, and because we were thinking really fast and making things happen, and we got a fantastic response to it, and that was one of the joys of it, having thought, God, we've only done this in 3 months, and we've got something up, and people are coming, and they came in thousands, but force of the time.
I guess that you were kind of on one level lucky, in as much as what you've been doing, but we're coming back to what you're doing before in the real world, or whatever word we use, events before that. But it's fantastic, Adam, that you've spoken about that transition and the excitement and the risk and the worry, we all went through that. And depending on, it's just so someone will probably already have written books about this, where you have a chapter of someone in a different industry saying, how did you cope with the change to digital? So, in my job, we were actually, in fact, we just come back from the European Fine Art Fair, which is the world's, arguably still most important classic art fair for antiquities, old masters, and classic modern work. And we were there in March 2020 when COVID quite controversially broke out in the fair, and they didn't close it down quickly enough, so there was a huge controversy. We had to bring all of our students back to London. In fact, many of them went back to their own home countries, and I never saw them again in person until the degree ceremony the following year. But we also managed somehow to cope with moving straight into an online lecture format. And you and I would have had the original teething pains of, as you say, Wi-Fi connections, and Zoom had to keep sort of making up all the time. It would suddenly realize that it wasn't quite all of these things. Everyone had a different problem, I guess. And I remember, for example, it made you very creative. So I remember contacting some of the galleries that I would normally take my students to, and they were able to visit their gallery, obviously, even during COVID, but on their own, and they would hold up their smartphone and take you around talking about the work still in the gallery. It was very bizarre, but it worked very, very nicely. And I mean, another person, for example, had moved from London, from the Antiquities Gallery in London, up to her parents' house in Scotland. She said, "Look, I can still do this for you, though, David, because my parents have an art collection." And she sat in an armchair and got out like a Corinthian bronze helmet. She was an antiquities dealer, and all sorts of things she was suddenly getting off the mantelpiece and talking about how you handle them and what, how rare they are and what kind of collectors are interested in them. So yeah, it's fantastic that you managed to quickly convert what you were doing into, and I guess you were lucky in the sense that everybody started doing something like Netflix or signing up to the Royal Shakespeare, all of the Royal Opera, all of these things suddenly had a thing where you pay a small subscription. You could sit there and
Yeah.
be entertained for the evening, and you knew you couldn't go, so you could do this. But I guess your thing, which I never knew about, to be honest, I'm ashamed to say, but that sounds like something that would have been very entertaining. So what I'm going to ask you now is maybe you could go back to some of those early events, and can you remember the first such event you put on what the location was and what the responses were?
So I sort of, it's more a bit of a story of how I fell into it, because at this time I was an actor, and another person who I knew as an actor contacted me and said, "Oh, I'm doing a corporate gig, and we're doing some extracts from Shakespeare. Would you be interested?" And all I was interested was, okay, great, I can earn some money and turn up and pay. And it was actually for BT, which was a good notion of having communication and having Shakespeare about communication. And it was in a place called Castle Ashby, and they were holding a conference for about 30 people. And in the evening during dinner, we were to come in and perform some famous speeches like Queen Mab from Romeo and Juliet speech by Mercutio, or Henry V, around the table and bring it to life. And if I'm honest, it wasn't very good. I was just there really to earn money. I was rather cynical on my part, but what was really interesting, and this was kind of the light bulb moment, was I was looking at people and they were just enchanted by listening to the words, and they were enjoying it. And I thought, gosh, if you did this well, how much better this could be. And maybe that's what I could do. I could do that. And that's how it started. And in fact, I had been at drama school with Mark Rylance, who at the time that I was having this process, he was the artistic director of the Globe Theatre.
Sure.
And my approach was, when I started we started with the spoken word. And we started with Shakespeare, and very quickly we broke into Oscar Wilde and Noel Coward and things that I thought would entertain people for someone who was having a dinner, be they corporate or private. And we would use, I basically had the standards that I would normally apply, that if I was doing a play in the West End or in a repertory theatre, of the standard of people to come and do it. Anyway, Mark Rylance had heard about this work, and he said, "Oh, this sounds really interesting. I'm actually opening a new space under the theatre called the Underglow, which is the permanent exhibition to the Globe. And we want to have someone to come and run all the entertainment there." So it's a long story, but basically I got this job to do that there. And so we started by doing a lot of Shakespeare, and then I started to think, oh well, you know, we've got, for example, Romeo and Juliet, but Romeo and Juliet's inspired by West Side Story. Why don't we do an evening of music from West Side Story? Or there's an opera called Romeo and Juliet. You know, there's an opera, so we then moved into opera. So we started to move into other worlds, as well as things like magic. So there's a lot of magic in Shakespeare's plays. So that it was a way for us to shoehorn our way into having magic shows as well, and all of these things started to develop. And then a lot of the clients that I got to know and who liked what we were doing said, "Oh, we loved what you did for Shakespeare. Could you do some circus show?" This actually happened. So this was just at the time of the millennium, when circus was quite big in the Dome. There was a big show in the Dome at that time.
Peter Gabriel.
Yes, which has now become the O2. Yeah. And this client of mine said, "Oh, we're going to rent Kew Gardens, and one of the Temperate House at Kew. Could you do a circus in there?" And almost before I could stop myself, it was out of my words, "Oh yes, we could do that." Of course, I knew nothing about it at all, but I've always found that I talk to the best people who can help you. And I went and talked to a lot of people about circus. I won the trust of Kew and the organizers there, and we ended up doing an aerial circus in the Temperate House at Kew. And that's one of the again, it comes back to that sense of invention is, gosh, I'm sure we can find a way to do that. We just need the right people to come and help us do that. In my work, we do a lot of circus work. And in fact, I've ended up lecturing at the National Centre of Circus Arts, talking about performance and about how to interpret character for circus performers, and also bringing on new young talent that comes into our world that we end up employing on our jobs. And that's actually part of my giving back process. So I'm sort of shooting forward, but that sort of arc is where we've gone, and we've now gone into everything. There isn't really a type of entertainment that you can think of that we don't do, and that is opera, ballet, burlesque, magic, the spoken word, literally everything.
And you do some of the locations. I think you've already talked about the Temperate House in Kew. I mean, you know, who would think of, I mean, I can imagine. I missed it. I for some reason I missed that. But I can imagine that must have been absolutely amazing to look at. But in I think you work on like railway events, don't you? On Pullman luxury railway events. What sort of things do you do there? And is the train moving, and is it in any way connected to the train?
Well, this was again happened before and after COVID. Pre-COVID, there's a train that runs from Paris to Venice called the Venice Simplon-Orient-Express.
Yeah.
And they had a press launch every year in February. They do a press launch where they invite travel journalists to come and spend 24 hours on the train, and they wanted something amazing to happen. And they got to hear about us, the kind of work that we do. We do, for example, a lot of 1920s style entertainment. And they said, "Could you come and do something on the train?" We set all of that up, and then the whole thing fell apart because of COVID. It didn't happen. We'd done all the due diligence on it. We knew how to do it. We knew how we were going to make it happen. So fast forward, someone approached me, called me up and said, "Oh, I gather you know how to put on entertainment on the train, on the Venice Simplon-Orient-Express." And I said, "Yeah, actually, I do." They said, "Well, what we want is a 1920s Gatsby show to take place on the train, and then for it to turn into a murder mystery." So I thought, oh, this could be great for 24 hours. So on the train, there's a beautiful, it's all 1920s deco. It's absolutely stunning. And the carriage where the bar is, there's a piano there. And we decided how we were going to put on a show. And I got to know the general manager, Pascal, is a lovely man who grew up. He started as a steward on the train, is now the general manager. So he knows the train inside out. He's a very bon vivant French man. He's very entertaining. And I said, "Oh, how are you getting the train up to Paris to start this?" And he said, "Well, we do what's called a dead leg. We just bring the train up empty." And I said, "Well, if you let me rehearse on the train on the way from Venice to Paris, I'll put on a show for you before we get to the PR event." And he said, "Oh yeah, great." And I said, "Look, if you can let me film it and photograph it, and then we can promote it." So he took me at my word. So 20 of us went out, got on the train, and we put on this big show all the way from Venice to Paris. We rehearsed it, filmed it, and then did it coming back. And it was a huge success. I mean, by my own standards, because it presents its own problem doing something on a train. And at the same time, the company who owned the Venice Simplon-Orient-Express is owned by Belmond. And Belmond also owned a train called the British Pullman, which runs out of Victoria. And their general manager, a very nice chap called Craig Moffat, approached me and said, "We've heard what you've done on the Venice Simplon-Orient-Express. Would you be interested in doing something on our train?" And I said, "Oh yes, I'd love to." And went and had a look at the train and really got inspired. So what we do is the British Pullman is a vintage train. One of the carriages is designed by Wes Anderson. So the interior is as you would imagine. He's passionate about trains, also Wes Anderson. So each carriage has a different character, inspired by a lot of the Greek gods, like Perseus is one of the, Minerva is another one. And they're the most amazing marquetry and fabrics. And what happens is we started off looking at that and thinking, okay, with our characters, let's inspire all those characters from the different design of the interiors as a jump-off point for all the characters. And then we devised a murder mystery, which a writer that we have been working with called Neil Kelso, who came up with this great idea of the Festival of Britain in the 50s, what would bring a lot of people together at one time where change was happening. And the Festival of Britain was a brilliant moment, was a sort of jump off point for all these characters, our 10 characters who meet on the train, have been to the Festival of Britain, and that was why they should be there. And so there are about 200 people get on the train each time we go out through the Garden of England route, out to Whitstable and back. You have the most delicious 5-course lunch with lovely bottle of champagne and wine. And then whilst you're sitting there, a murder mystery unfolds in front of you. And it comes in all sorts of parts. No one guest will have the same experience, depending on which carriage you're sitting in. So you will meet your first character, and it will always be the same, depending on which carriage you're in. And then during the course of the traffic of your time, you meet all the other characters. And as you go on, your knowledge gets, obviously you're getting more and more knowledge about what's happened. Plus we have a beautiful magazine that we commissioned, which is has all the characters, has lots of puzzles in it, so you can be solving puzzles. There's a bit of a backstory, all sorts of red herrings in there as well. So you sit there having a lovely lunch, watching this drama that unfolds, and it's just a joy. I mean, we got the most amazing reviews last year. And by their own standards, the take-up was phenomenal. So this is not my figures, but this is their figures, that 3 billion people had commented this on social media,
Wow.
which is I find hard to believe. But it got 5-star reviews in an awful lot of the national press. And my wife and I had been out to a party. We knew the Sunday Times was coming out, and we stayed up to look online at the Sunday Times. And literally there and then, this is one of the great joy. Opened a double-page spread, and there was this fantastic rave about this experience. So it was a total joy that we'd created, literally written, costumed, acted, designed, everything from scratch. And that's still running. The show's repeated this year. But we have a new show that we're about to open in May. So the murder mystery is a daytime trip
And that, sorry to interrupt, that would be the same story. So you're not necessarily going to get people back. You
So
might get
at
a
the
few.
moment,
Yeah.
at the moment, we're doing the same show that we were doing last year,
Yeah.
with the same actors.
Yes.
The actors loved it so much they said, "Oh yeah, we'll come back next year." But we're very happy because it allows that, because we do 30 shows a year,
Yeah.
so that allows in the period March till November, they go through that period, and but it's a daytime trip, and we thought, again, from our conversations with Craig at Belmond, came up with this idea to do an evening cabaret, and to take our inspiration for this from the Devonshire Club in London, which was where a lot of people went in the 20s and 30s. It was a destination, and the concept of going to see cabaret. And there were not just one being the only inspiration. There was another cabaret club in Soho that was forever getting shut down by the police. So we thought the jump-off point is that all the people, the guests and the artists, had been shut down by the police in Soho and find their way on a train and determined to carry on with the cabaret. It's a bit like Some Like It Hot. So we now you now see a whole cabaret show that happens on the train.
That's fantastic.
In the
And
evening.
I was just going to ask you, because like my students are art business students, so they would be very interested in your kind of, if you like, business model. As I understand it from what you just said, but correct me if I'm wrong. Your so the company Belmond signs a contract with you and your group, and then do you have like a certain number of permanent employees in your company?
Yeah.
And or do you have like a pool of actors that you can call on? Is that the way that works?
That is. So that comes in two parts. We have a full-time staff within the company. There are 7 of us
Yes.
in total, and that's split between our bookkeeper and our marketing and the people who deliver the events, and that whole creative drive and how to make all of that happen. So that's the team who are permanent.
Sure.
And then literally we reach out like to tried and trusted on every front. So that will be a designer. So Stuart Charlesworth, who designed the costumes, was someone whose career we've been following, and had the huge pleasure of going to him and say, would you be interested in doing this? Actors, we did a week of casting with a casting director. We have a huge pool of the same with dancers, opera singers. Literally, we have a reach out to basically, because everyone, sorry, that sounded rather arrogant. I was going to say everyone wants to work for us, by which I mean that everyone wants to work for us because we do real, very high quality work.
Sure.
So we get very lucky to work with amazing people, actors, singers, as I said. And that, for example, the operation of the train, on any given day, we've obviously got the 10 actors, 2 understudies, 2 makeup, 2 wardrobe, a stage manager, and someone from our side. So it's a big team who are live on the live event day.
Has anyone ever suggested like making a film, a movie, an hour and a half to 2 hour thing of this event on the train? I mean, maybe it just wouldn't work, but I can just imagine that doing quite well if it could work.
Yes, I think it would. I would love to do that. We actually have filmed. You would find on our website, you can actually find a 1-minute version
Yeah,
of that
of course.
experience,
Yeah.
which is great. We would need a backer like Netflix. If you're out there listening, do let us know.
But
It would be great.
presumably it's mixed media. So you'll have the Murder on the Orient Express Agatha Christie thing, but presumably it's also partly musical, is it? This experience?
No, when I say there is some music, so when you arrive at platform 2, there is a waiting room, and there is always some entertainment
Oh,
to
right.
get people into the mood of what they're doing.
And a glass of
On the
champagne.
for our cabaret, there is lots of music.
Yeah, of course,
So
of course. Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. I was going to ask you, do you have any competitors? Have other people come along, or did you disrupt something that was already happening, or has anyone ever tried to copy you?
um, it's it's a bit like if you look at a Venn diagram,
Mm.
we cross over into all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
So a lot of our work, we think of ourselves as storytellers,
Yes.
and to probably to yourself, you're mostly thinking about the theatre element of that. But there's a lot more to that than we do. We do a lot of charity work. So
Yes.
we retain by Save the Children, Duke of Edinburgh International Award, Action for Children, where we are telling their story, often using our theatrical skills in order to communicate those ideas.
Hmm.
Um, but sorry, I've slightly lost my train
No,
of
no, I
thought.
wanted to talk about those charity events, particularly I think with younger people. And I think you received an awards, the company received an awards for some of that work.
Yes, we have. So we won a big award for One Young World, which was its 10th anniversary, and for the opening ceremony at the Albert Hall,
Hmm.
where pretty much the great and the good globally came to the Globe. The Prime Minister was there, plus the world press was watching what we were doing,
Hmm.
and we were to tell the story of what One Young World meant
Mm.
coming to London. And our inspiration was that for me, London was a place of change where change happened.
Hmm.
And what better place to set that trend further than to do it in London?
Hmm.
And I also, obviously, because of theatre, I can't help myself. The Royal Albert Hall is a little bit like the globe, and it's round. And the fact that all the world is a stage, and the fact that it very much is spoken about the world being round. So we use that as a jump off point. So I had literally someone who just qualified at RADA, young student, was put in front of the world's press and global audience. He opened the evening with All the World as a Stage, walking through the audience in the Albert Hall. And then we had I think we had 200 performers. So representing, we had the National Centre for Circus Arts, who I got involved with it. We had a 20-piece orchestra playing. We had Everyone's Talking About Jamie. We had a cast from Everyone's Talking About Jamie. So these were kind of I would hate to say issue pieces, but they represent telling a story that enhanced that theme of One Young World. And it was a huge pressure because we all had to happen. We had one day in the Royal Albert Hall, and we had not only 200 performers, but we had every single nation from the world. If you imagine the opening ceremony of the Olympics with everyone coming with their flag, we had to do that. And we only had one rehearsal with them to do it. Many of whom didn't speak English. So that was a huge challenge. And then one of the other big moments, which no one had ever done this before, we used a fantastic, again, it completely was perfect for the theme, was this huge giant helium balloon. It's called Dream Engine. And so we hid it in plain sight, which I mean is a magical trick. So we put it on top of the stage at the Albert Hall and projected onto it, so it appeared to be flat with the globe. And then when we started this ceremony of everything coming, it lifted off and flew out through the audience with someone waving a flag and welcome to England. It was incredible. So those things, it was just a real high point of trying to do this and to get it done in a day. And when it finished, because I had literally not sat down for 1 second since 8 in the morning till 8 in the evening, because we, trying to drive everything through. And then I sat behind the lighting controller while the show was happening. And I thought, how did that just happen? That we had all the leaders from the globe coming to watch this event that we produced, and with completely sold out. It was an extraordinary thing. There was one moment that went wrong, which was in the morning, I had to record all the guests who were the young ambassadors. So everyone from around the world, so people like Bob Geldof was going to be speaking, Meghan Markle, but there were lots of people who were coming with very, very difficult names to pronounce. And so the idea was we would record all of that in the morning to make sure we'd done that. So no one had to do that and insult someone by calling them the wrong name. Anyway, I'm standing behind the lighting designer and what's called the show caller, who's the person who presses all the buttons and makes it happen, who's talking on comms all the time to say, stand by, lights, actor B coming on, to cue everything. And we were about halfway through, and she took her headphones off and just turned behind me and said, I'm afraid that the sound file that you recorded has corrupted. You're going to have to do it live.
Oh, no.
And there were 40, I think it was something like 45 people who I introduced live from the back of the room who was going to literally about to walk out on stage. And honestly, some of the names were so complicated. And I had in fact, the managing director of the company stood next to me, and every time I was about to say, whispered into my ear the right name.
Thank God for that.
I lost a lot of weight that day
you can imagine at our degree ceremonies, our students are from all over the world, and I have to read out their names, and I kind of know them by their first names and have never really had to pronounce their surnames. And so I have to I'm online looking at how do you pronounce, there's these kind of things, these apps now where you can actually listen to a Russian person pronouncing a Russian so that you get it right. But then the problem for me then was so a student might fail to turn up at the last minute, and you're looking at the person, you're thinking, is that, because usually I've got 80 to 90 students. I only few of them personal tutors. Some of them I still don't really know that well. So you're also having to check, is that person? And I don't think I've ever got that wrong, so but one day it will happen, I'm sure. So I just empathize with that situation. You feel pretty nervous about it and need a stiff drink probably afterwards. So Adam, I was just going to ask you if coming towards the end of this now, but could you tell us what a typical, maybe think of a day recently and what a typical day in the working life of Adam Blackwood would be? Is it a mixture of administration and direction and something creative, or does it really vary?
I'd love to say that there was an easy way of saying that what's a typical day like, but what I could say is that there are two types of day because of the way we split. So it would be generally a day which is of devising, thinking, admin side to it. And I would say that 90% of our job is thinking of all the things that can go wrong and trying to plan for every single element of it. Because unlike, as we've been talking about Guys and Dolls happens 8 times a week. And once it's up and the machine is there, it just repeats itself.
Sure.
We never have that luxury because we only ever generally, apart from what I'm doing on the train, is it happens once. And so you only get one chance to get it right. So all the time on a daily rate, we have to make sure that everything has been thought through and organized, paid for. Have we paid everyone? It's all of those things that come together. And that's 90% of the job. 10% of it, you would think, of that moment is the inspiration and the actual delivery of the creative. And Funny enough, I heard someone say this on Desert Island Disc, which I thought was rather wonderful, talking about Picasso. And he talks about when inspiration comes, I want to be seen at work at my desk or seen at work working in his studio. And because you never know when it's going to come knocking at your door. And that is very much what we do is we're thinking around where we're working, how we're working, what we've organized. And then so my other day is a day where we would, a little bit like as I described for you what happened at the Albert Hall.
Mm.
A recent example was we produced a children's event for Save the Children, which always takes a book. Each year we choose a different children's author. And for example, we've produced an event around The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So my day is about all these suppliers, set builders, lighting people, stage managers, artists who come and create that magic. And we will transform Narnia, the wardrobe, the way you brush through. Once you get inside, how Narnia is melting and how that translates, queuing up all the lighting, queuing up literally right from 8 in the morning till 11, 12 o'clock at night. That's the day, working with a lot of other people of not only our team, but freelancers. And it's a nerve-wracking, but joyous thing to do. A lot of adrenaline, and when it goes well, the payoff is fantastic. The perfect example of that is Save the Children, which we've done for many years now. We raised £1 million for Save the Children through that event and through everything that we're part of making that happen.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. And that's the pleasure of all our thinking, all our hard work has paid off for the charity. And there couldn't be anything better really than that.
And I think you already said that you're working again with the British Pullman. Are you doing also the Orient Express as well this coming year?
We're hoping to do more shows on the Orient Express.
Yeah.
In terms of, it's funny, one of the things that I've got real inspiration from the British Pullman is every guest who comes is happy. And I found it very, not surprising, but it becomes joyous because all of these people who are coming on the train, they're all excited. It tends to be a birthday or a family celebration or someone's getting engaged. We've had everything, and come on the train and they're full of expectation. And it's a beautiful train as well. It's absolutely, my real pleasure that my office sometimes is the train, and it's a joy. So those things are really great. So. Sorry, long-winded way of saying, yes, we're doing a second year of the murder mystery we're doing on the train, but we're launching in May this Carriage Club, which is where a full cabaret happens in the evening, completely different from the murder mystery. And that's leaning much more into the 20s and 30s, whereas the 50s is what our murder mystery in terms of it as a period.
So there's a lot of kind of nostalgia for British 20th century culture coming through as well. And any other plans this year? Is that, that's probably enough, but
so we've got two big projects coming up. We are going to Berlin in May. I can't tell you who it's for, but basically it's a Cabaret Berlin salon. Sure. And we're taking over a team of about 30 artists who will perform a big cabaret. So with a full live band, dancers, singers of a show. If you can imagine the Great Gatsby party, that's kind of what the Baz Luhrmann brought to life. That's what we're doing.
Fantastic. In Berlin as well.
In Berlin, which couldn't be a better place to do cabaret, really.
That's fantastic. Oh, well, all sorts of things going on, and I'll put the links in the podcast, of course.
Thank you.
Adam, I think that was really fascinating. I think that the listeners will really have enjoyed something outside of what we normally do, which is more about like the art world. But I think that they've got the imagination to realize actually we're all doing something quite similar in in the sense of bringing joy to people and making them think more, maybe doing charitable events, etc., but also problems and solutions. We've got to set up this stand at this art fair. We've only got 24 hours to bring in our lighting and bring in our works of art. Have they arrived yet? Similar sort of headaches probably all the time, but a similar joy once you create this theatrical experience
Yeah.
for the public and different publics. It sounds as though you're working with a lot of different publics rather than just one group of society. So I'd just like to thank you again for sharing that with us, and good luck for your events this year.
No, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure, David.